Hi, it's Anna here. Thanks for tuning in. So I think I've mentioned before in some of my videos that one thing that I've struggled with in my life and through this path is what I call the rose-colored glasses. And in working with other people and discussing this topic with other people, I've realized that it's actually something that quite a lot of us are struggling with. Um, and it's a whole process of this path of awakening to actually come to see reality exactly as it is. And what I want to discuss today is to actually talk about why is it so hard for us? Why does it feel like we're pushing through like such a boulder? Like why does it feel so difficult? For me, it's been the hardest work I've ever done. And this is where we need to understand that the whole point of being incarnated here on Earth is for human evolution, for consciousness evolution. We actually come here to evolve spiritually because we can't evolve outside of Earth. We come here in the 3D realm for this. Um, and there are things that you would have noticed in your life that come pretty naturally. So even though you might need to spend a bit of work, sort of to reawaken it, um, it doesn't feel like a new muscle, so to speak. So for me, for example, when I started on this inner work journey, reconnecting within to my senses and feeling within, and this is my strongest spiritual organ, the clairsentience. That came quite naturally to me. I had to apply myself and work because obviously I live in the same society as everyone, and I've had to like rebuild that muscle in a way. But it's almost like the muscle was already there because I've had lifetimes before where I've done this. And I've realized that awakening the dark feminine, removing the rose-colored glasses, it's something that feels kind of new. So I feel like we have several incarnations where we come and work on the same things. Consciousness evolution actually takes time, but removing the rose-colored glasses has been something quite difficult for me, and it's been difficult for other people that I've spoken to. And what I'm observing actually with what's happening, where there is so much confusion in the field. I've been very clear on speaking about this. I'm realizing, especially through the work of Rudolph Steiner that I want to talk about today, that it's because we are actually evolving from what he calls dream consciousness, which is where we come from, to a more objective consciousness. So there's this quote from Steiner that I want to start with. So this is from GA46, and you can find that online by Rudolf Steiner. In the dream, self-observation is practiced. The thinking activity, which otherwise disturbs self-observation, stands still. So does the sensory activity. Imagination and inspiration are present. The will rests on intuition, the presentation on sensory activity. Both are absent. The dream takes place outside the senses and outside the metabolism. It takes place in the rhythm of breathing and blood circulation. Memory is weak because the sensory activity is absent. In a dream, a person is neither moral nor logical. Dreaming continues in waking life. The somnambulist is in relationship with the outside world, but not through his normal physical body, but through that part of his being that is associated with the imaginative and inspired world. In dream consciousness, it is the soul that is active. In somnambulism, it is the body. I quite like this reference to the somnambulist because we've all spoken about the fact that, a lot of people are living unconsciously. I mean, I did before I had my awakening. The awakening path, it's actually called waking up, coming to reality. It's actually waking up from the dream, the Maya, the illusion, right? It's so fascinating when you read this because if you've studied and healed from narcissistic abuse and narcissism, you'll understand why a lot of the times you've struggled to break off the cognitive dissonance, the fact that at times you were even disassociated, where you didn't remember things accurately, because they bring you into their shared fantasy, right? So that's what this dream consciousness is really referring to. The fact that we're not truly consciously present in our life, truly consciously living. And I want to add more because I found a book by Rudolph Steiner called Druidic Wisdom and Consciousness Evolution that goes into a lot more detail. So let me read this. Let us take a particular instance. The Druid observed the growing plant. He observed in a more living way what later on Goethe observed more abstractly in his idea of metamorphosis. The Druid saw the downward streaming sun forces, but he saw also the reflected sun forces in everything that gives the plant its form. In his natural science, he saw the combined activity of sun and moon on the root, which is wholly within the earth and has a function of absorbing the salts of the earth in a particular way. He could see that the action of sun and moon was quite different on the leaf, which wrests itself out of the earth and presses forward into the air. Again, he saw a different action on the flower, which pushes onwards to the light of the sun. He could see as a unity the activity of the earth. To him, plant growth and the being of the animal were also a unity. Now, why am I spending time on this? I want to use it as an example. And I quote this particular one because I do indeed think that the phenomenal lecture course was a very important event in the history of the anthroposophical movement, to show how man's consciousness and his whole constitution of soul were quite different at a time not so very far removed from the present. With his present-day consciousness, man cannot realize what lived in the consciousness of this ancient humanity. And what I have said of that ancient humanity could also be said of other peoples. There we catch glimpses of a quite different constitution of soul. Men in those days had no idea of what we experience as abstract thoughts. All their thinking was more dreamlike, and they did not live within such sharply outlined ideas and concepts as we do today. They lived in dreams which were much more vivid and alive, more full of substance, and indeed their waking life was really a sort of continuation of their dreaming. Just as nowadays we live in an alternation of dreaming or dreamless sleep and the abstract ideas of our waking life, so they alternated between this dreamlike everyday life and a dreamless sleep, which was not wholly like ours. When they woke, they felt that there was still something remaining of it from sleep, something which afforded a sort of nourishment for the soul, which they had absorbed during sleep, and which could still be felt the aftertaste of sleep in their whole organism. There was a third condition, which no longer occurs in human consciousness, a feeling of being surrounded by the earth. And when a man woke up, he felt not only that he had been asleep, of which he retained an aftertaste, but that he had been received into a kind of grave by the forces of gravity, that gravity had closed him in, and he was, as it were, within the embrace of the earth. Now, just as we can describe our present-day states of consciousness as waking, dreaming, and sleeping, so we should have to say that at a certain stage of the past, there were the three states of dreaming, sleeping, and being surrounded by the earth. So I thought this was a really good extract to really explain what I'm talking about and the information that I've come across that has really helped me understanding some of the things that I've struggled with on this path, and explaining that it's not, we're not saying that the ancients were not sophisticated. It was actually quite a sophisticated way of being connected to nature and the earth and experiencing spirituality. But it's different, now we have the mind, and we shouldn't fall into a misconception of ancient mysteries and wanting to go back there. We should try to bring back some of those mysteries and reconnect with the earth so we can feel that embrace again, but in a different way, because now we have a mind and now we've evolved our consciousness. So I hope that makes it clear. This is actually a great book that I recommend as well. And understanding this is actually very difficult to grasp, right? It's very difficult to um, try to understand what consciousness was back then, right? Um, so the only thing we can do, which is what I'm doing with this video, is to try to use this knowledge to understand some of the limitations that we've experienced on this journey for ourselves, and to try to unshame why it's been hard, to empower ourselves and to understand that we are actually evolving that consciousness. So a lot of what Rudolf Steiner's work is about is actually trying to make us really understand objectively this consciousness evolution over time. And the fact that even though we may have a tendency to romanticize the past, we're actually not meant to bring back the past exactly how we were doing it. We meant to actually evolve and bring a new flavor of it. And a huge part of that new flavor is actually engaging with reality objectively and individuating um, through our ego consciousness, our higher ego consciousness, um, which is very different to how we were living in the past, which was a lot more into this, what he calls the dream consciousness, which um, it was more of a sophisticated group mind. We were not anchored in that individuality and that ego, and we were a lot more connected to the spiritual realm. Actually, we could see it. We could actually. It's almost like we had this what he calls the atavistic clairvoyance, where we would walk around Earth and actually have these images all around us. So I want to dive deeper into this because I feel like it's actually an issue for a lot of people, and unlocking that level of understanding has brought so much clarity for me. So I'm hoping it's going to help you as well. Um, so what Steiner explains is that the incarnation of Christ, and specifically the crucifixion and his resurrection, was a turning point in human evolution, because we were given this ego consciousness. We were given this strong sense of needing to individuate, this strong sense of morality and conscience, and needing to acquire an objective understanding. So this is why a lot of people are talking about Christ. It's because, it's important to understand that it was actually a turning point for us in terms of consciousness. Now, the thing is that consciousness evolution actually takes a lot of time, right? So it's not as if he comes and boom, like we all have acquired that higher level of consciousness. No, we actually have to apply ourselves. Like Christ didn't, we've got free will. God doesn't just come to save us and give us everything. There's different organs that have been given to us to help us and make the path so much simpler for us and so much more objective. But we need to do the work for ourselves. And that work is a maturation process, where in the past we had more this sort of like childlike consciousness, where we were more like children. We had to be led. We actually did a lot of the spiritual evolution through higher beings like angels. Now it feels like we're alone a lot of the time, because even though we're never alone, but because we actually have to do this work now. It's time. We can't, we're not children anymore. We have to evolve. And it's funny because for me, sometimes I feel like I've been forced to put my big girl pants on, and I just didn't want to. So this level of precise understanding that Steiner has brought to us is actually bringing me a lot of understanding of why it was actually so difficult for me. And obviously, as a side note, I want to make clear that there is a dark force trying to prevent humanity from evolving organically. So it's not as simple as saying that we're not doing our job. It's actually really hard, and it shouldn't be this hard. So, but having that awareness makes us understand where we can have roadblocks on the journey, why everyone is confused, and where we should really apply our energy and focus our energy on. So when I was healing from narcissistic abuse, I was, spending a lot of time researching different experts, and a lot of them actually are talking about the narcissist being stuck in a delusional reality, stuck in a fantasy reality, and then they pull you into that. But the way I like to do my inner work is that I use whatever is around me as a mirror as well, in the sense that when I see this, I'm also asking myself, where am I doing this? So obviously the narcissist does it on a very high level. It's an extreme. But I also like to question where I'm doing these things on subtle levels. Because for any topic that we discuss, there's different levels and degrees of intensity of things, but it's just so helpful, even if you're doing it at a subtle level. Even if for you the rose-colored glasses are only at a subtle level, removing them is going to be so powerful in your evolution. It's actually how you truly, truly evolve on the true path, and you attune to the true light at this time on earth. So I started asking myself, where am I doing that? And I spent a lot of time daydreaming, actually. I spent a lot of time in my head, daydreaming and feeding on that daydreaming, that fantasy, to help me cope with my life. It was a way that made my life not so bad, that I didn't have to take the action that I needed to take, because I could feed on that. I remember as a teenager, I was doing it on such a high level, like, I was an expert at it. I could spend hours in my head. There's other times where I've realized that I was projecting my own light onto other people, where it's almost like I had them on a pedestal, and then that pedestal had to come crashing down. It's what women experience, where you're into the love bubble, or the honeymoon period. That's what it's called. And then once the honeymoon period ends, you realize, oh, actually, I don't really like this person. This person is actually not for me. That's the rose-colored glasses. That's the fantasy. That's when you projecting your light onto other people, and almost like falling in love with someone that actually doesn't truly exist. Like, we have to be very clear and honest with this. Inner work is really, you make true progress in inner work when you have a strong degree of self-honesty. And I'm not going to lie, it's really unpleasant. It doesn't feel good to see our limitations, but it's how we have breakthroughs. And I'm seeing it as well with a lot of women when they talk about being in this soft girl era, or romanticizing their life, when actually they should probably look at their life and take the action in their life to course correct and recalibrate. Like, a lot of women are spending a lot of time reading romance books, right? Romance novels, and daydreaming and feeding on that, when they're actually not in a loving relationship, and they're not fulfilled in their relationship. And instead of addressing that, we escape into that fantasy land, right? And once you awaken, like, the true awakening path for me felt like the rose-colored glasses were ripped off from me, and I couldn't put them back on. And once that happens, and it's a process, right? It happens over many years, because you try to put them back on, and you have to release them, and you try to put them back on, right? Because we are so humans are programmed to reject change, right? We are change is really uncomfortable. This evolution of consciousness is really uncomfortable. Once those rose-colored glasses come off, you have to face what's happening in your life, because you can no longer escape. You have to face it. Um, and that's why, with New Age spirituality, a lot of what's out there and that's really popular in social media is very unhealthy, because it's feeding that delusion. And, I'm aware of so much. I know that there are dark occult groups who understand this so well. They understand exactly where humanity is at. They understand exactly that we still have remnants of that dream consciousness that we need to push through to come to the other side at this time. And they will, inject the world with various different stuff that's supposed to be like socially engineering us to not do it, to prevent us from doing it. That's what people have called psychological operation. In many ways, the New Age spirituality has been a psychological operation. There are many parts of the New Age that are good, like we need to actually reconnect spirituality, and it's amazing that so many people are talking about it. But that level of delusion and fantastical thinking is extremely backwards and extremely harmful, actually, because that's what Steiner explains so well. When we are operating from an old consciousness, an older consciousness that we're supposed to evolve from, it's actually harmful at this time on Earth. It's harmful to us, harmful to our energy body, because we're not attuned properly. We're not attuned to the true light. And I mean, on a very crude level, it's harmful because evil is real. Evil is very real at this time on the planet. And those of us who have gone through narcissistic abuse understand this very well, that you can actually die. You have to face it, and you have to protect yourself and say no. But the purpose of this video is really to make you understand why it's so hard, and to validate the fact that there's nothing wrong with you. Some people are trying to take advantage of that. And if we have full awareness of this, then that's where we can really empower ourselves, and also be loving and compassionate and kind to ourselves, to understand why it's actually hard. Like, we are actually evolving our consciousness. It's a huge deal. It takes time. And the fact that you're finding it difficult is not a limitation, or it's not that you're doing it wrong, or that there's something lacking in you, if that makes sense. It's the job that you came here to do. You came here to do this. So we're evolving from this dreamy, more like groupthink consciousness, to fully facing reality, truly seeing it objectively, truly understanding what we're dealing with. And it doesn't actually take away from the mystery. That's another thing that I want to discuss, because I've realized I've had resistance in many ways at times to dive into even the Steiner work, because he talks a lot about spiritual science. And there was a part of me that thought, well, if I dive too much into the spiritual science, like, I don't want to lose that mystery. And the thing is, actually, you don't, because the deeper you go into this spiritual science and this understanding, the deeper actually you can activate this inner union with God. And the more you can actually achieve true peace and joy, truly from within. So the remnants of that dream consciousness, were making me view this a little bit in a distorted way. So I also want to share that, because I feel like that's what a lot of people have also resistance towards. That's why they love that fantasy. That's why they resonate with it, and they get attracted to all these delusional stories that we hear sometimes that are just not rooted in truth at all. Um, and the fact that releasing that doesn't mean that you lose the mystery. There is still so much mystery. It's actually made things to me more beautiful because they're actually more real. That's what we're coming back to. We're coming back to realness. We only want what's real at this point, what's real inside of us and outside of us. And that older dream consciousness is harmful because it is disassociative at this point. You know, this disassociation that a lot of us have had to actually heal from, it's coming back to reality. You know, this is what we've had to heal. For those of you who also had to heal from narcissistic abuse, this is why the cognitive dissonance is so hard and why it takes so many years sometimes. It's because we literally evolving our consciousness at the same time. It's a huge undertaking. It's a huge job. So true spirituality at this time is not about escaping anymore. We're not children anymore. We need to put our big girl and boy's pants on and mature spiritually through resistance. I'm not gonna lie, I've had so much resistance to this. But this is what we need to be doing. We need to be engaging with true reality exactly as it is, to people exactly as they are, and to ourselves authentically as well, exactly as we are. And we have to bring the mind to this, right? Because we need to engage spiritually, you know, through critical thinking and objectivity. A lot of the false light narratives, a lot of the time, are about killing the ego, releasing the mind. And I just want to be clear that this is actually a distortion of true teachings, because if you actually go to the true teaching, to the true Eastern teachings of Buddha, for example, he never actually said that. So it's actually a distortion. But when you hear that, when you hear people talk about that, it's actually the opposite of what we need to be doing right now. We need the mind. The mind is great, except that we need to balance the mind and the heart and the intuition. We need balance and unification. But we need to come to see things objectively, and we need to release that daydreaming fantasy land. We can't feed off that anymore because we need to activate the inner union within so we can be fully fed from within. And you'll realize as you progress on this path that you will lose the ability at some point to be able to even daydream. So that's what happened to me about a year ago. And I only realized because a friend was telling me about the fact that she was still fantasizing about someone, and I tried to do it and I couldn't anymore. So you know, you still have visualization, you still can ponder on things and topics and be joyful, but you no longer have this fantasy daydreaming that you can feed off of. Something that's, you know, that doesn't exist. That's not rooted in reality. You know, when you fantasize about a man that's actually in another relationship, like that's not reality, regardless of how we want to package it. Or even just fantasizing about a man that's actually not in your life right now. We have to come back to reality and present moment and exactly what's happening in our life. And there's so much beauty in that. I think that's where I want to end with, because I think that's part of why I had so much resistance. I thought that I was losing something, but you're not losing something, you're evolving it. There is still so much joy and beauty and mystery, and you are actually coming back to you know, a sense of reverence and childlike wonder, but objectively, in the sense that you won't be able to be tricked anymore. So it's like a level of mature innocence. You're not a child anymore, but you're also not taking life so seriously and you know, becoming so cerebral and being boring. Like, it's none of that stuff. It's still, yeah, it's mature innocence. So that's the task. That's why we came here. That's why we incarnated at this time. And that's also why it's so hard understanding that, we are evolving ourselves in our consciousness. And there's a force on this planet trying to prevent you from doing that. And it's flooded the market with these narratives and these concepts that are feeding off of um, people's level of consciousness, which is making it harder for people to evolve. So whenever you hear someone talk about coming back to a level of hive mind, of groupthink, no, or like releasing the mind because we no longer need it, or I don't know what else other people say, or like killing the ego, like that's not what we're doing. There's a difference between lower ego and higher ego. We are very much individuating. We are coming back to what's real, to objective truth and reality, to a deeper, more precise understanding of spirituality, which is probably going to evolve, over many years, to a strong level of morality and conscience and understanding of right and wrong and good and evil. We're evolving. And this is the gift that Christ gave us, to receive this sense of autonomy and the ability to self-reflect and evolve ourselves instead of relying on, angelic beings. It's actually another thing as well. Like a lot of people in the New Age are really relying on their spirit guides and all of that. And a lot of them actually then come back and say they've been tricked by demons and stuff. And I've always had actually a strong sense that I'm meant to not engage in that level. And that makes sense. It's because it's another way that we externalize our power. We actually meant to do it now within. And that's why it's so difficult. And that's why a lot of people are struggling. And that's why a lot of stuff that's really popular is actually backwards. So I hope this is helpful. My intention is to unshame you unshame you, like if you feel like you shouldn't be struggling or it shouldn't be this hard, to validate this process a bit more and get into a deeper level and more precise level of understanding of what we're doing and why it's so hard, and also to empower you to be fully aware of what's going on and what's happening in yourself and others, so you make sure that you attune properly to the impulse of our time, to true light, so you can actually truly evolve, vertically, make true progress instead of looping horizontally. Because this old way of, this old dream consciousness is actually stunting our progress and evolution. I also invite you to check out Rudolph Steiner's work if you haven't already. He's got many books where he talks about this, or you can research online. There's lots of blogs and articles that talk about this. Yeah, that's what I had for you today. I hope this is helpful, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.